Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm very, very happy to be here and feel very honored to have to introduce you to an incredibly amazing panel on the occasion of Vian Sora's first solo exhibition here at the Third Line. So I would like to just make a few introductions. So Vian Sora is an Iraqi-American artist based in Louisville, Kentucky. Vian was born and raised in Baghdad, where she completed her degree at the Al-Mansour University. She remained in Baghdad through the Iraq War, before eventually leaving, or having to leave, in 2006, where she went to Istanbul, or London and then Istanbul. There she studied printmaking at the Istanbul Museum of Graphic Art, and later she moved to Dubai. So she was here between 2007 and 2009, where we initially met, but our friendship really began now, a year ago, and here we are. So she lived here for 2 years and then eventually moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which is where she is based now. Vian's work delves into themes of history, memory, and transformation. House of Pearls is her first solo exhibition here at the Third Line. Her pieces are part of prominent collections, including the Baltimore Museum of Art, Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, the KMAC Museum, Santa Barbara Museum of Art, and the Pizzuti Collection. Vian also has a survey show that will be opening in June of 2025, which will be traveling from, it starts at the Santa Barbara Museum, then it goes to the Speed Museum in Kentucky, then it goes to the Asia Society in Houston, and on, we hope. Next, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Omar Kholeif, Professor Dr. Omar Kholeif, who is an award-winning artist, author, curator, and historian who has been described by Zachary Cahill as a force in culture and by British GQ as one of the driving forces in British culture. Since 2018, Omar has served as Director of Collections and Senior Curator at the Sharjah Art Foundation, the government of Sharjah, and as Visiting Professor in Critical Race and Fine Art at Teesside University in the UK. In 2012, they founded Artpost 21, which is a publishing and broadcasting platform that supports outputs at the nexus of art, technology, and social justice. The author of several books, one of their recent volumes, the best-selling Internet_Art, From the Birth of the Web to the Rise of NFTs, is available here at the Third Line shop. So if you'd like to take a look after the talk, our shop is now upstairs, please do. And finally, and Sheikh Sultan Sooud Al-Qassemi, who is the founder of Barjeel Art Foundation and a dear friend of mine. Thank you all for being here and looking forward to listening to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It's a pleasure to be here with an old friend and a new friend, whom I would like to welcome back to Dubai, your home, for a period of time. I want this to be an open discussion, so if at any point of time, if you guys in the back have questions, please do ask. You don't have to wait to the very end. We can break rules as we go along. Vian, I want to ask you about your journey into the world of art, because you didn't study art. You never went to art school. Mm-hmm. And so, how come you can produce all these beautiful artworks around us?
Well, first, thank you for being here. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone, for coming in this lovely afternoon. I told you I have two answers maybe for this question, because I have a controversial idea about, that you don't need to learn art. And the way I was exposed to it in Baghdad, I was born in 1976 to a family that supported artists and owned galleries, and the oldest modern auction in Baghdad, Mazad al-Baghdadi, that actually still exists.
Founded by your mother?
By my grandmother and her brother, Talib al-Baghdadi, Dr. Talib. He passed away, Allah yarhamah, last year, and two of their other siblings. There is a quick story about that building. It's the building, that house, it was their family house. It was on the Tigris, and it's where Kulthum stayed for the first time when she visited Iraq in, I don't know which year, because I wasn't even born. But then later it became all these houses, and then they took part of that street to build Saddam Palace that still exists there. So that's the environment I was surrounded by. I was exposed to my first artwork. I saw a Jawad Salim painting in my grandparents' house that later they sold after the war because they needed money. And that's my first kind of encounter that I was just obsessed with. That was my way to kind of express who I am. And obviously, almost every child think they're an artist when they begin, and I grappled with that idea. I thought that I should never go to art school so I don't get influenced by the group of pioneers, because it was male-centric, kind of dominated scene where everyone graduated, painted like the Rawaj, so I wanted to avoid that. So it's a long answer to your question.
But you had a chance encounter, was it? Or you met with a very important pioneer in Iraqi art, Faiq Hassan?
Yes, so I was 12. I think it was a year before he passed away. I think he passed away 1993 or 4. And there used to be a Friday auction and then, al-Baghdadi auction. And all the artists, him, Mohamed Ghani Hikmet, Ismail Fattah, all these artists, that was their way to meet the expats and the scene of ambassadors there who bought their work. So it was like a networking scene. And Dr. Talib told me that you should bring your file of sketches. And I did, and I went there with my dad and talked to him, and I was terrified. And he said, if I were you, I would never go to art school. And that stuck with me. And I'm glad I didn't, because probably I would have not. I'm not saying anything about art schools, by the way, because, yeah. I think it's
it was
important.
good advice?
Yes, but it took me, art is a journey for me also, is to arrive to this. And it's a it is literally self-taught, but I invested heavily in learning through other artists too.
I'd like to move to Dr. Omar, who has written extensively on art and technology. And Vian, you studied computer science. And so I wonder, Dr. Omar, could you situate Vian Sora's work in 21st century art? Do you see influences that are recognizable in other artists or other regions or other schools and movements of art?
I'm so sorry to take the mic from your hand, but let's start this beautiful show. Thank you so much for this show. It's really a privilege to be sitting within and amongst these works. Yes, I think, what was interesting is seeing the work in a picture. It's kind of odd, the flatness that kind of, especially the works on paper, really doesn't do justice, which is kind of amazing because so many people, collectors, like maybe you yourself might buy works of art from a PDF in this day and age and think that, one of the great things about global culture is that we can buy art from all over the world, from auctions and things, by looking at an image. But what actually I think about when I first look at the work is I started to think about not painting but photography. Why? Because the first person that came to mind was a photographer who I've worked with extensively, a conceptual photographer called Qassemi, because he doesn't photograph people, although he does actually. He photographs people's contexts. Their bodies are there, but they're not quite there. And in these images, as I look at them, there's always a kind of body, but there's no body at all. It's almost like there's two images, but they're not two images. There's actually 10 images or 12 images. But within the history of actual painting, one could argue that it emerges from a history of abstract expressionism, and that there's, which is a post-war genre that came out of the war, which feels relevant considering that your background as a person came out of conflict. I mean, conflict always creates a setting for this kind of eruption of feeling. But I really like the term that Sean Scully uses, which is emotional abstraction, which is that the painting becomes a space for the artist to unfurl feeling, and what we get to see is something in the interstice, which is the light in between what's happening. We're never going to truly see what exactly happens because we're not allowed inside the artist's mind. That is a very private space, but we're given the topography to project. And I think of artists such as, for example, Laura Owens. I think of artists such as Dana Schutz. I think of artists such as Amy Silman, but I also think of artists such as Hugues Caland, who were very much sometimes by withholding form or suggesting form can lead us down many paths. But you also have a very distinct way with your material. So although the show is called Sea of Pearls and there was this kind of narrative that was crafted, I chose to kind of ignore all that. I didn't want to kind of read that because I saw something else, which is I saw lots of interiority of the body that was really pleasurable for me to engage with and project into. I kind of found it rather like this phenomenological experience. And thank you, really, thank you. It was really special. I literally came off a plane and came into the show and hadn't expected to be so taken.
Me too, by the way. I'd like to maybe build on a point that Dr. Omar mentioned, which is the cultural context. Vian has shown in Baghdad, she's shown in Istanbul, she's shown in Dubai, she's shown in Louisville, Kentucky. And so my question is building on the idea of cultural contexts. How is your work perceived in these different cities, whether it's in the West, whether it's in the East, whether it's in your home country? Do you notice a different reaction to your work?
I think the most important and just in terms of the region, and the most humbling experience in terms of how I was received was in Kuwait City in 2006 and 2007. This, just without sounding like braggadocious, I think I was the first Iraqi artist to hold a solo exhibition in Kuwait after the invasion of Iraq of Kuwait. It was still, I actually didn't even get a visa. My husband opened the first show. It was in Dar es Said Museum, and it was organized by Aspen Gallery. And the next year, it was so successful that one of the sheikhs invited us personally, escorted us through the airport. I was terrified, and during the opening, it was the most humbling experience, because for me, that's what's the role of artists. Part of it is to culturally somehow bridge these horrendousness that happen between these specific countries. So that was one of the most important encounters in terms of that perception. Going to an opposite of where I live in America, I have two reactions mainly. One's that completely supportive, wanting to learn more and, trying to do some background. And then you have this stereotypical approach and trying to put me in the Orientalist, damaged female from this damaged country in the region, which really I always strive to go against and try to, it's like, please, let's not do that, reading the book by the cover. But it's always interesting, like coming back here was just such a powerful, experience, just to see like this beautiful crowd, but also in the opening, I don't have to explain my background or myself or the iconography or the themes or what you feel. I don't have to talk about regions because we're all similar somehow. So it's always interesting to, again, a long answer to your question is to just to where you would have the most surprising or, alienating or almost aloof, but also like mothering. Like, this is what I'm feeling right now. It's mothering. It's like going back to something that I didn't expect that people would understand. Coming back with this body of work, I was kind of hesitant because...
Vian, this is your panel. You can speak as much as you want. Don't apologize at all. We're so happy that you are speaking to us. Dr. Omar, Vian's work, it sort of oscillates between destruction and renewal. Much like her story of, going to different places, exhibiting, reflecting, some of the unfortunate past of the region. How do you see this tension reflect in arts around the world in the 21st century?
I mean, it's very challenging working in an institution at the moment, especially a government institution, because, I mean, ostensibly people don't realize, maybe it's because where I work is called foundation, that I'm just a civil servant, and the words that I say are controlled when I'm introduced and the job title is used, right? So, and the work that we show is often political. We support, we're very proud to support the artists of Palestine, of Iraq, of Lebanon, and to stand in solidarity with Sudan and the cultures that are completely being decimated, and to think of the fact, if we look at a global map of conflict and people, sometimes I'm in London and I go to these gallery openings, people say, the Third World War is coming, right? And I say, if you look at a map of global conflict, there's as much conflict, trench warfare and drone warfare, as there may have been in the First, Second World War. It's just no longer in Western Europe and North America. It's just splintered out across into these nodes that don't affect them, basically. But it does affect them. Do you know why it affects them? Because it affects the art market. And because for a period, London's art market was funded by Russians and Ukrainians. For a period, the hope was that the Persian, now the Arabian Gulf as we call it, to be politically correct, was going to fund the London cultural sector, not-for-profit sector. And I feel that. So when we talk about an artist like Vian Sora in London, the first thing they think about is, oh, and that's such beautiful work, and does that come with funding? And that's really how it works. And it's really terrifying, because we cannot extract anymore that from the work. And I would love it if we could, and we could just do these shows without having to do that. And I recently did a show, and you saw the show a couple of years ago, about a theme, but yet it became tethered to a politic. And I don't want that. Actually, do you know what? It would be really nice if the work could speak for its... The work is political. This work is inherently political. It would be wonderful if we could just allow the work to speak its own politics and just create the setting. But our role is just so politicized because of the need for resource, which we don't really quite have.
I'm assuming you were speaking about the exhibition in Germany, amongst other shows that are...
Oh, in the Heart of Another Country was it was a show I was talking about, but also was that it was a group show that was a concept show. It was based on a concept, and then it became a show that they really wanted to tether to an agenda to tie the UAE and Germany together. But then at that moment, there was this tension around Documenta, and they, for some reason, decided to conflate these things. And then there was the World Cup, and let's conflate these things. And they don't understand the difference between Qatar and UAE, and it's all this ridiculousness. And so suddenly, I didn't get to speak at a press conference, have the press conference that I wanted. There was no English press invited. Those kinds of things. So many artists who are showing for the first time in Europe don't get to have a voice, which is really crappy for 6.5 years of work. But the show is successful by the measure of success that we wanted to measure it by. And then we decided to have we called it a rising in Sharjah. And but when I think of Vian, it's like what my role as a collections director is, we're a state collection. So when we look at the work, we would like, the goal would be, if we were to acquire such a work, we would want to show it in many contexts, right? And that will be one context, but the privilege is that you can keep showing it in so many different contexts. But if the context doesn't change, and this is what I'm saying, I've been doing this job now for almost 19 years, and I feel like I've gone back full circle, where it's become back to even worse than it was 19 years ago, where I'm being told we're going to bring a rabbi to kind of christen the venue before you arrive. And I'm like, why? So that we can have an interfaith ceremony before the artists come and discuss your idea. I'm like, what's my idea? I'm just doing a solo show of an artist. This is in Vienna. I'm like really confused. And these things keep happening. Work is politicized from above, and it should be looked at from below. And so you're going to have this show. You're going to have to speak. And I'm curious, what do you want to achieve with that show? You're going to have a show that's going to go to every city, right? Including your hometown, which is now Louisville, right? And the Speed is an amazing museum. You have one of the best, one of the best Sean Scully works, which is called Crossing. Bring that out and look at it. I mean, oh my God, it's so good. Oh, how did I got that? I don't know. Anyway.
I'll tell you the story later.
Okay, but what do you want to achieve? What story do you want to tell?
That's a great question, thanks. Because that survey show, it's gonna survey the 6 craziest years of my life, where I was just like a feral animal, I'm just gonna say it. I told you today I'm gonna be myself. And I was just dealing with the aftermath of crazy surgery, rejection, what am I doing, all these things. And then, family members getting rejected, their visas and their immigration status, dealing with some family members arriving and how to provide financially for them, and how to fit these parents who come from this great cultural background, many stories, how to fit them in this town, how do you create life for them while creating life for myself, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, and that's when the work changed. And that's when the work also started. I went back to confronting the most traumatic thing in my life, or one of them, was when I worked in the Associated Press in Baghdad between 2003 and 2006. And my first year job was to go cover the explosion scenes firsthand. Apologies for the graphicness that's gonna appear. And I arrived to the scene and I see a hand on an AC unit, a leg, a torn torso. Those were the scenes. And I go back and lie to my parents that, oh, I'm doing this great job. So after a year and a half from this job, they were like, this is too brutal and dangerous. You edit the images. So I edit all these dead people. And then I get comments still until this day where people tell me, oh, there's too much joy in your work. How come you lived in Iraq for 3 decades? So, which is very tone deaf. And this is what I want to say in this show, is that look at my raw story. You finally started looking at me as an artist when I started to somehow exploit my reality. Let's go to Beirut. My first encounter with Beirut was year 2000, 2001. I just told you, Dr. Musa Qubaisi gave me a great group show with artists that I didn't dream of, which some of them I forgot their name, sold my work, and suddenly the scene in Baghdad that looked at me as, oh, this daughter of this people who is around artists, never went to art school, that's when my market started. And I went to Beirut for a week, and it changed my life. And now I watch Beirut on TV and what's happening. So that decimation, destruction with all these cities, this is part of the cycle of the life and death of also these generations that is living in this region. Whether if you're here and you're living safe, you're still part of, triggering you. And I lived that, and that's what the work deals with, and it deals with my narrative, and that's what's going to be written, you know. And it's actually working with 3 male curators been great because they're listening to me on a whole different level too. Nothing against female curators, I love female curators, but also it's like, okay, this is your show, whatever you want to put. And there is, I hate the word message. There is no message in the word work. It's just, this is my life for 6 years. I'm finally putting that out.
Maybe I can just build on the point that you just mentioned, which is, I think, trauma. And does art have a role? And what role does art play in dealing with trauma, whether it's personal, whether it's collective? The question is open to both of you, but Vian, since you have the mic.
I mean, trauma is definitely in the background of every artist's work. You know, every artwork that was created, I think it has trauma. Somehow the art world there is a lot about, let's make the work about trauma. My trauma right now is, I wouldn't say buried, because I had to kind of burn myself and rise from the ashes to get to this work that you see. That some people see joy, which is fine. I mean, there is joy because I'm always a very hopeful person. But trauma is the foundation, obviously. And, you know, I don't know if this is the full answer, but also when you think about the world that we're living right now, where the most important artworks that we look at museums that survive the, you know, let's say, the degenerate art, and now there is this movement of finding these works and trying to, like Kirchner and all the names we know. So these works were based on that trauma of trying to survive, of trying to actually remain being an artist while the world is burning around us. In my case, I am using it as somehow, I mean, it's there. I'm not talking about it, but it's definitely there because I feel like I'm reaching more in the concepts of the sublime, and then, you know, like it's visceral, of course, the work is very visceral, but I'm trying to reach to the sublime always and think about the dichotomy of life and death and all these themes. And I'm sorry.
I was just going to say briefly that last night I was editing a book, a manuscript that I'm finishing, that I'm publishing, of Simone Fattal. At the time, she didn't have a single book in print, and I was really surprised. And she's another artist that I think you have incredible connection to, because when I looked at these works, I see distended limbs, and there's often, you know, in her work, this idea of the distended limb, that it's present. And one of the things that I had, it's very funny, I had asked the author to ask her, and it's a very meta book. It's like 3 authors, like together in against an artist. This is very weird, and I asked, and so she's asked, you're so privileged, you were able to leave Beirut, you know, to go to Paris, but still to go to Beirut when you needed to during the Civil War, and then to go to California. So in a way, you were able to run away from trauma. And she said, no, never. Trauma is universal. And because we talked about universalism as a concept earlier, as a really complex, almost oriental, you know, difficult concept that stems from religion, which is the bane of our existence, really, in the military sense. So Simone is a very important figure, someone born in Damascus in 1942, coming into light. And I think it's important to remember, if she's saying that trauma always stays with you, that it really does, and that you cannot escape it no matter what resource that you have. And that's important. No matter what it is, trauma is latent in our culture, I think.
And Omar, Dr. Omar, you've curated exhibitions in North America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in the UK, all over the world. is there an expectation by artists of Middle East origin to create artworks that are Middle Eastern, quote unquote, or that reflect the destruction that we see in parts of the Middle East? Do you think that's fair or unfair? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and then Vian, maybe you can comment on that.
Right. First, actually, it would be interesting to first hear if you've been asked that first. It would be interesting to know, Vian, if you've ever been specifically asked something such, because I mean, we know that the answer for that for me, but like, have you ever been specifically asked, hey, that's a bit happy?
I have a crazy story, but my husband should tell it. Yes, I've been asked 2006, before coming here, before getting married and escaping Baghdad and getting married in Turkey to my husband, who's American. I was interviewed. Jed was there, my husband and my dad, and I just left Baghdad, working with the AP then, and two of my friends just got kidnapped. One of them got killed. And the woman looked at my work and she said, I'm dying to give you a show, but your work is too romantic for where you're from. So I'm gonna show you an example of how the work you should do. And she showed me this Turkish artist who never been in his life to Iraq, who painted these American soldiers with a pig head and torturing Iraqis, and the Iraqis like decimated on the floor. She said, this is what you need to be doing. And the discourse I'm taking, and offered me multiple shows, and I turned and I took my portfolio and the one painting I took with me and left. And this is still happening until yesterday. I mean, the world want me to put my pain and my guts and whatever out there in a figurative way, because the shock factor is more gratifying. You, the Middle Eastern, this is what is needed and expected from you. This is gonna sound brutal, but it's like you almost annoy people when they see you like comfortable in your own skin. But then, of course, there are the curators and the networks and circles that absolutely get it. You know, this is why I'm getting a survey show with a full rein on how it's going to go. But it's expected. And I personally think trauma not only doesn't leave you, but the quieter it gets, the more it's far from what happened, the worse it gets. Like for me, I'm constantly triggered. Like it's every year pass, I think it's gone. I think certain things are gone, but it's not. It's not going to go.
I actually had an anecdote that I just remembered. There's Sunny there, because actually it relates. It's just a small one, which relates to an artist. Because I just commissioned a work by Omar Kholeif, who's an artist who Sunny introduced me to maybe four years ago now, who I've come to really admire and support, and I wanted to engage him in something to do with the Holy Trinity for some reason in London, and to commission him in this very unusual church-like space. And he was telling me that when he was making this figurative work, that he was being bullied by his friends for making figurative work in Tangier. And they were saying to him, why are you making this figurative work? Why are you making this figurative work? Why are you trying to be all Western? And he was saying, well, look, they came here and stole, our ideas, our passions, and we forget that, Matisse went to Morocco to extract, and that Paul Klee went to Tunisia to extract, and yet we create figuration and we're told that we're mimetic. And so that's quite an interesting point that he was making to his friends, but actually it's still looked at in that way, from a very simple sense, that we forget that very basic point, is that we have allowed historically Western artists to extract from our culture, and we have reified those artists' work. And yet when artists from our part of the world borrow tropes or references from those artists, we say, but why are you doing that? Why? It doesn't make sense. And so that's what I feel is discomforting when it comes to this situation, because then when Anwar made this beautiful work, Mirror Ball, which was referencing Matisse's Bathers, which Sharjah Art Foundation acquired, and I was really trying to encourage a curator who was looking at the work to borrow it for a loan. One of our jobs is to encourage curators to borrow. They're like, oh, but why would you want to borrow something that references Matisse's Bathers? But it's not, it's a Moroccan artist. We want something Moroccan. I'm like, but it is Moroccan. There's Sufi, but and then you give up. And so.
Never give up, please.
No, you give up on that person because you know what? We only have so much stamina in the voice.
Okay, before I take questions from the audience, and I think a couple of you have hands up, I have a technical question for you. Tell us about your process of making an artwork. We have this beautiful artwork that hangs down. You can pick anyone in the room, but tell us about the length of time. Do you revisit the canvas? Do you choose the size of the work? Do you conceptualize it in your mind first, or is it more of a freehand, sort of a free-spirited way of creating art?
It's a great question, because I've got asked a lot about this, and I realize that it's when you look at this current body of work, it's impossible to sometimes figure out how it was created, or like what's first, what's last. And I'll reference Olivine, the diptych there, which it actually took about 12 months to execute, and it started completely different, and it has a very kind of like a typography kind of nature to it, because I was thinking of regions and borders and breaking borders and bodies, and in light of what's happening with talking about borders right now. So the first thing I start is these initial drawings that doesn't look like the work on paper. It will look more that, like whatever pen I have, and I have these very quick drawings. And there is always an idea and intention about the beginning of the work. Then the first thing that starts always is somehow as freehand writing, because I want to keep that traditional Mesopotamian and also calligraphy, the Arabic calligraphy background that I have, that it will be too long to talk about. We will be sitting here for 6 hours. So I want to keep that, it's that, again, going back to the esoteric nature of my practice of talking and injecting things that maybe I am not referencing directly in the language that is the work and the context of the work that is discussed within. So it starts with all these like spray paint and calligraphy, and just, it's almost like it's your body, you're using your hand to begin. And then the work goes flat, and that's the last 6 or 7 years where I started creating these fake explosion scenes and reversing that. And that's where I go to 2 things that I didn't learn in the art school that I didn't go to, which is how Vasari started and Da Vinci started their work, which always with pigments and acrylic until you have this mass of color where I apply another thing of, that's where the Mesopotamian neural making comes back into, the dialogue of adding and subtracting color. And this is the difference from ancient Egyptian art. Mesopotamia's had all these they were obsessed with certain colors and applications, so it never stayed. And that's why it's all like your dishdasha color, what's left, which is interesting. Versus in Egypt, the color, there are more color in their artifacts, which I also sometimes apply in my work, especially in that painting, because I was thinking with that work of the regions, like I moved 4 countries in 5 years, and I was thinking of that landscape that when you see it from above. After about a month of adding, subtracting color and, starting on these aging, like you could see these details there, that's when the act of painting, starts, the obsession, the brush work, which takes months and months to reach to that solid color. And that's when I say there is an average of 40 to 60 layers of oil to create these edges. And I know a lot of people ask me if I'm stenciling, but I'm not that technical because I'm very random. So it goes from this control, chaos, control again, to go through the work, and many other things in between. Does that answer?
It's a great answer, yes.
I had just a follow-up technical question, which is, what do you think of things like minerals and scarcity of those minerals and where they come from when you're making any of these things, like the pigments, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, this is why olivine, called olivine, because it's, it's like the fossilized mineral that turned into a certain green that not many people, I think it's there's a French word that I can't claim to know when I Googled the name olivine to see if I'm stealing it from someone, but I didn't. So I'm always thinking about that. I'm thinking because that's the metaphor also of the dichotomy of life and death and creation and rejuvenation after destruction. And I always there is a lot of moments here of that burnt forest moment when things come out and come back to life. They come back stronger. So if you want to, you burn a place and it's going to come back, which is also going back to the politics of, what I'm thinking about right now. So yes, to answer you, I think about that a lot. I think about, subduction concept of the earth and tectonical plates and all that.
You're talking about the process that you follow, control, chaos. It kind of reminded me of the trajectory of your life of Baghdad. Probably there was some control and stability, then there was chaos, then there was control, then there was chaos, and you lived through 3 wars at least, or 3 or 5. Who's counting? But it's just brought back your comments. I saw there was a question from somebody, a couple of people here, maybe the one in the back first and then yourself. Do we have an extra mic or shall I volunteer my mic? Maybe introduce yourself and ask the question, please. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sultan. I'm a Sudanese artist, so I'm going to use my notes because my trauma of the war has led me to start where I started. My question, I'm not sure if it's a question, but there's a series of a lot of things being said. One of them was the Orientalist perception, and it is generally about the us versus them. And then there was a point about a lot of the works being extracted from the Western culture. And I couldn't help but wonder that it is an us versus them, right? And a lot of times, for example, Vian Sora has been, or has been a Sudanese great artist, has been, let's not say criticized for his figures before being the Vian today now, but a lot of it is actually criticized from the people of the land, from us Sudanese. And if we manage to actually realize it is an us versus them, then the artwork will be more of an identity context. And you also mentioned something about the work of the role of the artist being from a below perception. I actually think it should be from a below. Below is us, the artist, but also it's from the top. And being a circular motion and frequency motion, so that you can be a true identity of the us versus them and actually owning it. And especially if we live at a time where art has become a market, then this is the market. Is it, right?
Thank you, Vian. Thank you. Would you like to comment?
I think this is great. Did you read about the connection of last sound I have for, you mentioned Ibrahim Salehi. He's one of my heroes. Every time in London, I go on this pilgrimage to go visit the Tate and my favorite painting there, and he owns the other one. And that's my last sound is an homage. Yeah, I agree with you, and I always say something, and I reference that, is that artists live under the surface and above the surface. We have to make peace with trying to make our work. Also, we have to be seen by the us versus them situation. We have to be seen by that world. But I also add something controversial is that I had to fight my own way through my own country. Like, sadly, I had the least support in my life from the scene in my country. So I understand totally the us versus them, because finally I have nothing to prove right now. I'm 48 and I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing, although comfort is a dangerous thing. But yeah, I agree with you. I love this point. Thank you.
So I'm from Vian, met the other day in Bianca from New York. And one thing I'd like to say is that the word decimated has come up a lot in the conversation, but like my background is half African American, half Native American, Indigenous American, and I think one thing about Native Americans that's interesting is that really the genocide of Native Americans was not completed until people started to refer to them in the past tense. So I think the language of decimation, just your work resisted because you're creating new work. If you're a Iraqi artist that is making new work, Vian's a Sudanese artist who's still making work. And so I think it resists, that language of decimation. But my question, I think from my perspective as a painter, these works have such scale. And I don't think, unless you painted before, even if you painted a wall, you know how big it is. It's such a physical process. So I kind of wanted to go, I know you talked about having a surgery and that being a really big turning point for how you created your work, but in a woman's body that is aging, what is the physical relationship that you have to such massive works, which honestly, mashallah, is wonderful, but I just wanted to talk about the physical grunt work of being a painter. I think it's interesting.
Thank you so much for asking this, because these are small compared to what I've been doing in the last 2 years. Last year, I'm gonna brag about Abzu. Abzu is the Babylonian creation story. There is a very hidden meaning about it that's gonna come out one day, but we're not gonna discuss. So it was in Art Basel. It was 40-foot painting. And I'm someone with, like my surgery, and we can get in that. I had 7 surgeries because I had a car accident when I was 15 because of the Bush war, because we had no gasoline and we carpooled and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so yes, I am, after dealing with all the body issues and identity of the body and all these things, the practical thing that I'm dealing with now is that I'm working on a concrete like this about 15 hours a day for the last 3 years, because that's the amount of production required from me. I used to complain about not having enough opportunities, and now I have great opportunities, and I want to service them properly. So the work, where it connects directly to your question, the work is my body. It's, we like in America, the body trauma of female artists, but it's everybody has a trauma, but it is an extension of me. It's my life imprint on the canvas. And also, half of this side of my body is metal. I can't get out. But that disability gives me the power in emphasizing certain moments in my work. If I was a perfectly healthy female, it probably would be too easy and uninteresting. So I like that suffering aspect. But the thing that philosophically I'm thinking about right now, and practically too, is how long I will last. In a selfish way, I want to live forever if I could. I want to do more work because the possibilities are endless. And, so I'm trying to find more and smarter ways to create the work that I do without slipping on one of them and having another accident, which happens. But also these accidents are showing on the work. And it shows in terms of, that work is actually astral. I was just very angry when I created it. But you could tell it's my body, that move, that, that swerve. So yes, I don't know if I answered you.
What's the title of that work?
Astral.
So I want to give a chance to the left side of the room if anyone on this side has any question. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So I think maybe as a question to wrap up the session, Dr. Omar, first, did you want to comment on anything that was said earlier? In addition to that, okay, you comment.
Well, I guess I wanted to add that I'm also Egyptian of Sudanese background who also wasn't supported at all by my country. And when I remember the first time when I went to meet the most important person in the Egyptian art scene, who was a white person who I really did grow to love. They did ask me if I was a spy, and I was 20 years old, and I just finished my undergraduate degree, and I had to prove myself to them for 3 years. And I really found that really painful. And it's so painful. I just want to swear, really swear. I found myself in Lebanon in 2011, actually when I met Todd Rees, actually in 2011, and when we did that magazine for that year, and that was a very special year. We did this journal called Portal 9. I really did believe for that year, I really did believe that something could change, in the sense that there were a lot of people who were freelance and creative and not reporting to anybody. I was shocked by this. Someone who was an artist, a creative practitioner, a curator, an architect, an architectural historian. Wow, this was brilliant to me. This was just freaking brilliant. And I just wanted to be like that. But I stayed in institutions, and it's great, it's fine, but I built an amazing compass and consortium with collaborators, but I can't work with them anymore because they have to go and pay for a hotel room to have connectivity to work with me. It's awful. And when I try and explain to people how hard it is and how we need to support, they don't get it. I mean, I had to explain to someone that they couldn't ship from Lebanon recently. They said that we couldn't get an artwork because it couldn't be insured. They said, I'm sure it's possible. Look, I'm just gonna say it. Look, I was at a cocktail party at Maria Zucker's house last night. I totally get it. She was so sad. I totally get it. I know everything about the situation. I just felt, can you hear yourself speak? I felt so much pain in my body. And this is not a world that I want to live in. So I think we need to support people. We need to amplify voices. We need to reflect the reality of the situation and difficulties of the work. We need to not be quiet, but we need to express it in a language that is within the confines and parameters that we are allowed to speak within. And the way I've expressed myself now is not outward the bounds. Maybe it's not maybe it's not like get solidarity going, because that word's been co-opted. But let's find a fun way to do it, because we really need to help each other to make creative, fun things. And I guess I don't use us versus them, but I think us together making creative, wonderful things, supporting each other, building networks, resources, we need to do it however possible, way possible.
Vian, is there a point where you feel like I've made it as an artist, is there a point where you feel like you're being recognized as an artist and not as an artist of Middle Eastern origin? What would you like to see? You said nothing's off limit.
Nothing off limit. I love questions, especially here. So is your question about if I think I made it as an artist, or what will define me making it as an artist?
You're going to be showing a major exhibition in the US that's touring. When you're there, do you feel like they'll always look at you as an artist of Middle Eastern, of Iraqi origin? And what is the point? What is a signal that you get where you say, "Fine, I've finally been recognized as an artist, full stop, rather than an artist of Middle East origin"?
I think I made it as an artist. For myself, is a different question, because it's whether I'm satisfied or feel like I am evolving with the work. That is separate. But in terms of the art world, I think my biggest personal one was when the Speed Museum put the painting that's going to be in the survey show, Echo Narcissus, and they acquired it. It was a very controversial work, and they knew what, you know, and it was very political, and it was a pivotal moment for the work itself. And then after that, then I went into a lot of collections and museums, but I think always that's the moment when I felt, oh wow, this is a Southern still. You know, now they're diverse and different, but then 5 years ago it was a very Southern museum still, but you know, it was Miranda Lash who was the curator too, and it was a very personal work, bless you, and very political at the same time. And I felt that was a moment. But now, of course, I mean, I thought it was a joke when they offered me the survey show, because also it's very difficult to collect the material behind that because it's the most real work. So I'm very happy about it because also it's documenting a period of work that I don't do anymore technically, because now I'm very comfortable in terms of doing uncomfortable work. Then I was painting like no one else is watching, which I personally think is the best period for an artist, is when you think you haven't made it, you don't know what is your career gonna be like, and that's when you're doing the best work, and then it's like you're throwing the breadcrumbs for the next work. Mm-hmm. So I think, yeah.
Maybe to wrap up, I just want to say that you've heard a number of themes come up, and I think one theme that really encourages me is the role of the individual, the role of the ones. Sometimes there's this one single person that really propels another individual forward. Omar Kholeif mentioned a few names, whether it's Sean Kelly, whether it's Scully, whether it is his colleagues at the different foundations and museums that he's working at. And you've heard Miranda, and you've heard Faiq Hassan, and you've heard her grandmother and her family from Vian. And so, honestly, the role of the individual, one person can propel, one person can make a difference. So, in our case, Omar made a huge difference to us with Barjeel, really a pivotal moment for us. That you're curating an exhibition at the Whitechapel Gallery. So honestly, when I see individuals like this, whether it is Omar Kholeif or Sheikh Qassemi or Vian's family and mentors, and in this case, individuals like Sani Rahbar, who really, honestly, well done to Sani for taking a leap of faith, doing this this major exhibition before your exhibition in the US, I might say. So congratulations to everybody, and keep faith. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so amazing, and I learned so much more, Vian, about you. Thank you, Dr. Omar. Thank you, Sheikh Sultan. It was really a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. I thank you, and I thank you all for being here and for listening. And we're going to just, hang out here a little bit. We're going to have some drinks and some little light bites if you're free. I know it's Sunday, so no pressure, but if you'd like to stay and chat with us, we're here. And thank you very much again.